Welcome to the Beyond Cinema Studio presented by Celebs.com up here at Sundance. Jim McGreevey, Alexandra Pelosi. Firstly, congratulations on having the film premiere here the other night. How does it feel for you? I mean, you know, Emmy-winning, multiple documentary filmmaking, but yet this is kind of your first Sundance experience, right?
Yeah, documentary is sort of funny. There's like a lot, there's so many, I mean, I think every single person on the planet Earth I know calls himself a documentary filmmaker. I mean, like 1 in 10 people on the planet call themselves a documentary filmmaker. Every single person on the island of Manhattan that I know calls himself a documentary filmmaker. So, yeah, it's interesting.
So for you though, you've had all these experiences and yet to have, does it make a difference having a film here? Does it feel like something different, like a new experience, a new kind of mark?
I've made 8 films for HBO.
Yeah.
And I'm really loyal to HBO because they've been really good. They funded all of my films that I've made.
Yeah.
And so I didn't really feel like I needed to go to the festivals.
No, right.
But what I learned is when you go to the festivals, people treat you like an artist. You go from being a television showmaker to being an artist. All of a sudden there's like instant cachet.
But you have to hear Alexandra's George Bush story.
You want to hear my
Please.
Sundance story?
From you.
He doesn't want to hear this whole story.
No, it's a good story. It's a
Do you
good.
want to hear my Sundance
It's a
story?
great anecdote.
I'm not even sure I want to tell the story. I feel like you think I should tell the Sundance
You
story?
should. You are.
Okay, I'll tell you my Sundance story. Ready?
Yeah.
Okay. You sure you want to hear the whole story? Should I tell you the long version or the short
You
version?
can say the short version.
Yeah, he takes the short version. Okay, I'll try and tell the story in the shortest version I can.
Because otherwise we won't talk about Jim.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
Which is very
Who? Okay. Here's what happened. I used to be a dog. Okay, wait.
NBC.
No, I was going to try and reduce the story down. It's hard to
Dive
edit
into
stuff.
it. Dive into it.
I'm really not good with the self-editing. That's why I'm the editor. Okay, so
Yeah.
I used to be a network news producer. And when I was on the bus with George Bush, as a network news producer, I brought a camera along and I used to film him.
Right.
And he started to say, "We're going to Sundance." He came up with this. That was sort of his catchphrase. We'd make jokes. "Hey, turn your camera on. This is going to be good. We're going to go to Sundance." And then I made the movie
There's like stories.
and
of
I
George.
sent it to Sundance and it didn't get into Sundance. And I had to tell the president.
She had to tell the President of the United States that he didn't make Sundance.
Okay?
And how did he react?
Well, he moved on. He's like, "Oh, we're going to the Emmys." He's a little bit of a one-hit wonder. He moves on quickly. So
Squirrel.
I didn't ever put it into the festivals after that. The films that I
Okay.
made, because it was sort of like, you know, you got your heart broken and you're like, you need Sundance.
Gosh,
So I made 7 more films, and then 12 years later I decided, you know, I'm just going to try it, because the message of the Jim McGreevey story is we can't let our failures define us. We can't have that one worst thing that happened to us be the thing that defines, because, you know, it's kind of humiliating when you don't get in.
If that's the one worst thing, that's
Exactly,
pretty good.
Elliot,
That is
exactly.
pretty- I mean, talk about we're saying this guy working in prisons most days to not get into Sundance. I'm thinking he's setting the bar pretty high.
All right, but he didn't have to go tell the president that he didn't get into Sundance.
Right.
So I put
You have
it
to
in
tell
for
the
Sundance
nation that
this
he was stepping
year,
down as governor.
and then I was telling, and then at the first screening I was telling the audience the story about how I didn't get into Sundance, but now here I am.
But guess who was in the audience? Robert Redford. And she didn't know it. Alexandra was telling the whole story about her Sundance. Mr. Redford is in the back. And then he comes up to Alexandra.
No, it was worse because I was telling the story about the Robert Redford principle. Because even though I didn't get into Sundance, I decided that I was going to live by the Robert Redford principle, which is, do you want to hear the Robert Redford principle?
Yeah, sure, of course.
Okay. Here it is. So, Robert Redford made a movie called Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid. When I met my Dutch husband, he told me I learned English from watching Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid because that was his favorite movie.
Yeah.
And he watched it a million times. He could recite it from beginning to end. I was like, I never even saw that movie. I didn't care about that movie. But, hey, have you seen Quiz Show? One of the best movies ever.
Right.
And Robert Redford directed it. Now, I could recite every
Rob
word of that
Morrow.
movie to you because that was a great film. And that was Robert Redford. So I decided that somehow and all that was, you know, everyone has their favorite Robert Redford movie. And so I was going to live by the Robert Redford principle. I was just going to keep working because my best work would be ahead of me.
Right.
So here I am. I finally got to Sundance, and I was telling the crowd this because what was so important about the Robert Redford principle was that he is the one that brought up everyone here, and he gives so much exposure to all these filmmakers, and it's, you know, he's doing so much good with his fame. He's
Right.
using it for such good. And so I was trying to tell the audience at my Sundance screening about how much Robert Redford meant to me, and I didn't realize he was sitting in the audience. Awkward.
Was he checking emails or was he crying a little bit?
Well, he came up to us after. He was
He was
very
very gracious, as was his wife.
right. So there.
But it must have also, I mean, to have your parents there, that must have been pretty cool too. I
My
can't
parents come to
imagine.
everything.
Do
They're,
they?
they're
Are they
literally
like that?
the ones that show up for the soccer. They think of everything as like a continuation of like your high school, talent show.
Well,
They've come to everything.
in
I
ter-
mean, no, I mean, I'm sure they would. I'm just saying they come.
They're
to
good parents.
You know what's interesting is like, we kind of talk about Jim, who's there like rallying these people, rallying these women in prison, getting them to move forward, getting them to move on, see value in their lives. And what's interesting is I don't know who's your rallier. If you've got your parents who come to everything, who's your rallier? Who makes you take that next step after all that's happened to you? Who makes you get up and go and make those choices?
You're not allowed to say God.
That's what I would say. Well, obviously, I'm blessed with a loving partner and family, but I think Elliot, for me, it's shifting to a different value system. And Alexandra spends a lot of time in the movie showing, the old value system, where I was as a candidate, as a governor, and where I am today, and where the ladies are. So the women with whom I work some of them have very long criminal histories. They grew up in dire circumstances, public housing, ghettos, etc. And most of them, and all of them virtually, became addicted to dope, to heroin. And by virtue of their domestic abuse and sexual abuse and violence, they made decisions, but they were trying to stay alive. So now what we're trying to do behind bars is to get them to pause, to think, create a sense of self-awareness, to say, is there another way I can live my life? And for me, that other way to live one's life, if you look at Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous, it's the steps, the traditional steps. And the third step is to turn your life and your will over to your higher power, the God of your understanding. So for me, it's asking myself, what does my God call me to do this day, this month, this hour?
Was there ever a time after you stepped down as governor that you kind of lay on the couch and watched Oprah for a month, or was there that period of kind of wondering?
Well, yeah, but I went to I went to the Meadows, which is a place for addiction and recovery and trauma, and
Straight away.
No, immediately I went to a law firm, which is where everybody who works there should have gone to a place for addiction and trauma and recovery. And a dear friend of mine says to me, well, you're just repeating the same neuroses. And so the great thing at the Meadows is I was able to sort of shake out my life. All right, here's my political life. Here's my gay life. Here's my as a son. Here's as a father, and put this all on the picnic blanket and try to reassemble it in a coherent way with integrity. So I mean, part of the problem being in the closet is you differentiate. All right, this is what I'm doing here, here, and here, and that's part of the unhealthy quality about it.
I mean, it might be an obvious question, but now that you are reaching a stage or have reached a stage where your public persona matches your personal one.
Yeah, I mean, this was 9 years ago. So
Yeah.
over the course of the 9 years, I get up every morning and go to work. And for many people who've seen the film, the last thing that they heard is the I am a gay American speech. But obviously, I have a family, I have a loving partner. I get up and go to work every day. So life has moved on.
But have you thought about readdressing politics as, like, now that you have this kind of re-established platform for yourself?
I have no interest in elected politics per se. What I care about is women in prison.
Yeah.
The fact that America is 5% of the world's population, but we're 25% of the world's incarcerated population. 1 out of every 31 Americans is either in jail, in prison, probation, or parole. And the system doesn't work. Everybody comes out of prison. Within 3 years, they're back in with another felony. And so all the indicators demonstrate that time in prison makes your behavior worse. So we're putting more and more people into position that they're going to come out worse off. And I think the beauty of Alexandra's film is she saw this guy who sort of, Mr. Politician, made bad decisions, screwed up his life, ostensibly, and all of these women in jail, and the confluence of where they both came from and, God willing, where they're both going to. And so it's fall to grace. At the nadir of my existence actually was the gateway to a place of healthy living.
And why, again, first steps, why decide to apply that to helping people that were incarcerated as opposed to, say, the homeless who hadn't had felonies under their belts? Why was it prison? Why was that the first
I think
focus?
that Elliot, there was more of an accident when I was in seminary. The dean of the seminary asked me to go up to Harlem to a place that dealt with prison ministries, and I was dealing with men who had just come out of New York State penitentiaries with 18, 20 years underneath their belt, and it was very powerful, moving. It was also, for me, ironically, at the time, a place that I felt safe, that I would be beyond their scrutiny or their criticism. And then after graduating seminary, family obligations, I wanted to come back to New Jersey, and there was this new program opening up with women.
Yeah.
And a lot of people don't spend a lot of time focusing on women in jail because the population is overwhelmingly male, so this was really interesting.
Yeah.
And, these women become like your sister or your daughter, and you develop these strong emotional attachments.
And where did you guys first meet?
I've got a note from Alexandra Pelosi, a note in the mail.
Just saying, I'm curious.
I wanted to make a film about him, so I had lunch with him and his partner said, "No, thank you. We don't want you in our life." But that didn't stop me.
No, it didn't. It didn't. Alexandra has this little, and that was the great secret. I mean, it was not only Alexandra's tenacity, but the time she was willing to spend, because you can't get these shots by just, they don't show up on cue. So part of it was also developing trust with the women. So here are all these women, these women are anything but naive. I mean, they've been in the streets, and all of a sudden this, attractive, well-coiffed woman comes with her a little...
Well, not that coiffed.
Well, today particularly coiffed. But I mean, comes up with a camera and starts photographing. And so this was an interruption. I mean, photographing, you're talking about, for them, some of the most painful, agonizing moments in their life.
Yeah.
They developed an affection for Alexandra. She was, and Alexandra's point is, I'm going to tell an honest story. And so many people come with so much judgment toward people in prison. You suck, you're bad, you're evil, lock away, stay away. But the reality is 98% of the people come out. And so I think what Alexandra did with that camera was to say, these are human beings who want to live sober lives, who want to work for a living, and want to raise healthy children. Excuse me, but they want to do the same thing that most of us want to do. And by virtue of the dint of their circumstances, they couldn't get, because they started off, Elliot, in a very different place than where I started in life.
What do you think that the documentary enables you to present as a person, in terms of your personality, in terms of your perhaps new agenda, that you couldn't or didn't in your book?
Well, I mean, and it's a little awkward saying this. Alexandra is she brings not only the respect of her craft wherever she goes, but she's a high-profile person. And the fact that Alexandra Pelosi looks at these women and looks at me and, lovely Hudson County Correctional Center means that there's something there. And so at the end of the day, we brought light on a part of the world that doesn't get a lot of light. And the reaction has been really interesting. The reaction has been really... And let me be clear. It's the women and me, but it's Alexandra's camera. It's her time, and so I think what it did is brought attention to women who would otherwise be anonymous.
Are you comfortable watching yourself up on screen in this?
I did that as a politician. I mean, who actually want to do that. I didn't do that. I mean, obviously, the camera with Alexandra was ever present. So one, I didn't realize how goofy I was, as one woman said to me. And secondly, I mean, part of the interaction with a woman in jail is actually still painful, because, you become bonded, attached, probably unhealthily so. I mean, I'm not the kind of person that some of the women in jail, I mean, I've been working with them for 2 years, and so, they become part of your family, your DNA. And it was painful. There are scenes in the movie where, I've seen the movie twice now, and I still tear, like when it's family day and somebody has their children there and they're taking their kids apart, and the kids are clinging to their mother, and the mother, who's 23 years old, says, I'm not going to see my kids grow up. well, that just sucks. And I think, you know, the other thing is, Elliot, they also get mad because this system is just so bloody stupid. And, you know, we're just keeping these people in. Our program, thanks to Alexandra, I mean, we've got one of the lowest recidivism rates in the country. We're just recognized by the United States Department of Justice, one of 2. But I mean, for so many women and so many people around the country, they stay in jail for large swaths of time. They don't get educated. They don't come with skill, and they come out worse. And everybody knows it, but we keep doing it. It's just like, you know, I'm trying to get people to move from addiction to sobriety. We're addicted to the prison system. We're addicted to jail. We're addicted to incarceration.
Is there a particular politician that you think is getting it right now?
Well, I thought Senator Webb was getting it right. I mean, he sponsored the Webb Commission. I think Alexandra's mother is, you know, I'm a Democrat, so I always thought she got it right, but I know from being in proximity how she's been impacted by the film and Alexandra's work. One of my favorite anecdotes is, you know, on Christmas Day, you know, her mom's like, oh, how are the grandkids? And, you know, how are the kids? And she's like, well, I'm not there right now. And she's like, well, you know, I'm in jail. And so I think that when people are touched, whether Republicans or Democrats, I mean, Chuck Colson, who went through the bloody mess of Watergate, you know, got into prison ministry. His theology isn't mine, whatever, but it's a place that if you open your heart and you're touched, you're like, shit, they're just like me.
And there is that interesting kind of preface in the beginning third of the film where it's like people who have that kind of ego and drive,
Yeah.
you know, end up as, you know, preachers or parishioners,
Sure.
you know, versus parishioners or in politics. And it seems like you've managed to kind of morph across the spectrum of that.
Yeah, and it's just, you know, in the questions you asked, I mean, it's just for me, and I'm like, you know, I don't, but for me, it's trying to stay in my imperfect way as godly as possible. And to, you know, the ego, and AA, Alcoholics Anonymous, they call it easing God out. This is so, you know, this camera, this can be so addictive, and for me, in an unhealthy way. So as long as I am mindful of God's will in my life, this second, as I'm talking to Elliot, then it's healthy. As long as I'm in service to somebody else other than myself.
Right. Very cool. Well, congratulations on your healthy addiction.
Thank you. No, it's not an addiction anymore.
All right. Your healthy application.
Exactly. There you go, Elliot. There you go. Much better with the
I
word.
appreciate you guys
Thanks for
coming
showing your
in.
law school education. Thank you.
Thanks for spending a few minutes with us. Appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Thank you.